Finding Hope, the Road to Recovery.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the third episode of Finding Hope, the Road to Recovery. My name is Dr. James B. Golden. I have the privilege of being the Chief Academic Officer for Tarzana Treatment Centers College. And I'm so excited to be here today and to bring a wonderful, wonderful guest onto this show who I am absolutely obsessed with. I think the work that she does within our system and with our community at Tarzana Treatment Centers is absolutely phenomenal. And today we're going to be talking a lot about what does the community look like and what do we need to see in treatment services. So without further ado, I want to introduce Haben Berhe and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Oh, that's a very loaded question. Hi, everyone. My name is Haben Berhe, and I am the Dean of Student Affairs at Tarzana Treatment Center College. I am so happy to be here with you today, Dr. Golden. A little bit about me that you asked was I am a person that's very passionate about education and healthcare. And the beauty about my position is I am able to work with both major entities and be able to fuse them together to be able to provide everyone with an amazing education, an affordable education, and also provide them with an affordable healthcare with Tarzana Treatment Centers. So yeah, that's just a little bit about me.
It's so exciting. And it's very exciting because how often do you get to sit and talk about what you do and what's behind all of that? So I'm very excited to get into this. I think the first thing that we need to do is talk a little bit about why are we here? And Tarzana Treatment Centers is a wonderful organization that provides so much to the community. I mean, we have all kinds of services, but we launched this college because we understood the value of having the ability to train the workforce that we're also employing. And there's so much that goes into that you have to consider. I think one of the big things that's important for us is to think about the communities within Los Angeles that we serve. And specifically, one of the things that has happened in education has been that there was a lack of information that was set specifically for different groups of people in the community. Mm-hmm. A lot of times we tend to educate people based off of a monolithic structure of curriculum and practice. And we have the ability to say, well, we want to do something different. And we're not interested in doing what's always been done. Mm-hmm. We want to serve marginalized communities. And I think I'd like to talk about that today with you because you're a huge part of Tarzana Treatment Center's ability to work with the community and involve the community more. Just to get this out the way, let's talk about what a marginalized community is. And when we think about marginalized communities, the first thing that I think about is where I grew up. I grew up in Salinas, California. It's a little small town that's really famous for this guy named John Steinbeck, who's a huge writer. But in this small town, there are pockets of people that come from different communities. So yes, you have affluent white people, you have Black migrants, you have the veterans from Fort Ord, you have your senior population, you have migrant field workers, and so on and so forth. But there's all of these different communities that intersect to make this one really giant and enormous small city. The marginalized communities historically are communities that are confined to lower socioeconomic, or they're considered on the peripheral edge of society. We can see this from the great situation that William Shakespeare talked about. You know, like there are groups that are on the fringes of society. And so when we think about marginalized communities, these are not the norm. These are the ones who the curriculum is not usually designed for. These are the ones that you usually will not see their faces plastered on billboards around the community. And so good examples of that would be, of course, people of color, Black and brown communities, indigenous communities. You're not likely to see an onslaught of things that are related to seniors or veterans or hearing, visual, and physically impaired people, or people who have experiences with homelessness. And I think that you've done an incredible job of helping us to get to a place where we're now looking at all of these marginalized communities and what can we do, not only as an organization and a school, but as a part of this community. What can we do to help to shape and to reshape what it looks like for marginalized communities?
See, you pose such a great question, because that's what actually got me very interested in Tarzana and working with Tarzana Treatment Centers College, because one of our core values at our school is that we appreciate and accept everyone and their intersectionality of it. And intersectionality is the interconnected nature of social categorization, such as race, class, gender, age, but also applies to a given individual group or group. So regardless of creating an overlap of it, it's an interdependent system of discrimination and disability. So an example of that would be, let's take myself. I am a Black woman.
Yes.
I am a woman.
Yes.
I come from a family of immigrants. And on top of that, I'm a hetero straight. So all four of those have they all have different attributes of who I am as a person.
Right.
And singleizing one of them doesn't complete who I am as a person. So I'm able to connect all of them and be embraced of who I am as my true authentic self, that is able to explain my intersectionality and be embraced without being discriminated against about being a Black woman or being from an immigrant family. So all of those together make up who I am, and that's the beauty of our school. We accept everyone with their true authentic self, and that's what I truly appreciate, and that's what drew me into being at Tarzana Treatment Centers College altogether. It's the fact that we truly care about who a person is and not just part of a person. It's that whole integrated healthcare that Tarzana Treatment Centers talks about, and that's what grabbed me into becoming who I am and what I want to do. So
beautiful. No, I really appreciate you comparing intersectionality to this idea of whole person care, because a lot of times we think about the whole person in terms of, well, this patient needs physical treatment, they need mental health treatment, they need substance use treatment, they need primary care. But a lot of times we don't consider the unique needs of each individual. So yes, I am a part of the Black community, but I am also a part of many other communities based off of the intersections of my life. And then if you talk about one single person with all of these different intersections, that means that we have a very specific experience on this earth.
Exactly. We can't treat just one part of a person. And that's, again, a beauty about our school and our organization altogether, is that we truly care about treating the whole person. Because if you put a Band-Aid on someone, it's not fixing the problem. You're just temporarily fixing it, but that person still is dealing with other things that may link into if they have mental health issues or if they have SUD issues. Which one do you serve?
Right.
The beauty is we serve it all. And that's what we truly care about. And that's the intersectional portion of Tarzana altogether. And that's what I truly appreciate.
No, that really resonates with me. I tend to think about this idea of the importance of intersections in thinking about how people are treated. And we know that marginalized communities generally have a treatment that is outside of the dominant culture. This is something that we have to start to talk more about in healthcare, but also in healthcare education, which we're in a unique niche. And we need to be able to think about how do these people's intersections show up? How are we reinforcing them or at times damaging them? One of the things that I think about often is the gaps in care for people based off of these different groups or communities that they come from. And so if you grow up in a community that is impoverished, you are going to have a very different experience than a child who's growing up in an affluent area. Mm-hmm. You're going to have a very different set of accesses to medical treatment or to healthy eating. At times, clean water. There's still not clean water in Flint. So you think about these things, and depending on where you come from or what your background is, you may not have access. Specifically, when we think about substance use treatment in America, there has been a history of over-incarceration in communities of color. And when we talk about over-incarceration, this goes all the way back to the war on drugs. Mm-hmm. Specifically, the war on drugs went into communities of color, communities that were impoverished in urban areas, and put measures into those communities that made it completely unequal for the amount of people of color who ended up going to jail for drug-related offenses. Mm-hmm. A good example of that is you have two different drugs. You have cocaine powder and you have crack cocaine. This is the same drug.
Same drug.
It shows up differently and you do different chemistry. But if you were arrested in the 80s with a gram of cocaine versus a gram of crack, one of those sentences is going to be 5 to 10 years longer automatically. Mm-hmm. And that would be related to crack. And we know that crack cocaine is directly tied to the Black community in the way that it has been perceived. When you had Nancy Reagan, who had the campaign that was saying, just say no to drugs. And, I think when you had the president at that time, who was First President Bush, who held up a bag of cocaine and said, a bag of crack cocaine and said, this is America's problem. They were talking about the communities that were plastered all over the newspaper around the country as saying, crack mothers equal Black women. And so this is how we get sort of this separation and this marginalization of communities, when in reality, we know in our profession that SUDs do not discriminate. Exactly. And just because you come from any culture or background does not mean that you do not have access to the things that will cause a substance use disorder. And so that is a really important piece for us to think about. I think specifically in marginalized communities, we also have a lack of access to quality treatment.
I agree, especially in the marginalized communities.
Right. Yeah, I think specifically when you think about MAC clinics that are available or substance use clinics, usually they are placed in more affluent cities. Mm-hmm. And so when you go I live in LA, and when you go into an area of South LA, you may not see as much treatment facilities as you would in a city like Tarzana or Woodland Hills. And some of it is because of the location that it happens to be, but a lot of it is related to the systems that are created. So I do think it's important that we think about where can people go in marginalized communities to get treatment? And how do we as an organization work to make sure that people in those areas have access to treatment?
So the beauty about, again, Tarzana Treatment Centers College is that we go out and do targeting recruitment. We want to ensure that everyone at our community has someone that they could relate to as their counselor. So that's, again, another beauty. We produce students that represent their communities. So if I had a counselor that I wanted to go to, or I see someone that looks like me, it's a lot easier for me to talk about my difficulties than it is to talk to someone else that doesn't look like me. Then I have to explain why I'm eating so much soul food and, my cholesterol is high,
right.
and explaining what's in the food, and that takes more of my session than if someone that looks like me and understands my struggles already. It's easy to just understand that, not bypass it, but understand it, and then be able to move forward in my treatment to be able to assist me.
Yes.
And that's what we do at Tarzana Treatment Centers College. We produce those counselors to ensure that people have resources and allies in the healthcare system so they are able to get affordable healthcare and just amazing access to healthcare. It shouldn't be singled out to a specific community because of where they live. Healthcare, as we see in most other countries, is available to everyone. And that's what we're pushing for. We're pushing to ensure that everyone has access to an excellent service. And what we do at our school is, again, producing those counselors to ensure they represent their community, but could also give back to their community.
You know, as you were talking about this, it really reminds me of somebody who's really important to me, which is my uncle, who's no longer with us. And, you know, his spirit lives with me every day. But when I was growing up, I remember this vibrant man who had so much to give the community. He drove the city bus and he went to church and he was a record collector and all of these different things. You know, to me, he was just my uncle. And looking back as someone now who runs a college, I think about what he went through with substance use disorder. You know, like some people will call it addiction. Some people will say that, you know, you drink too much, but he really went through a lot. And this is somebody who lost his wife early on to a very tragic death. And I think he tried really hard to manage the substance use on his own. And I keep thinking, what happened in the community that we grew up in that wasn't good enough, or that made it seem like he wasn't good enough to receive that treatment and that outreach? And so, you know, for me, it's a lot more personal. I just think that so many people around the world are dealing with using substances and they don't always know that it's going to impact them the way it does physically or emotionally. And we have to do something to ensure that people like my uncle, who come from communities like where we're from, marginalized communities, have the same access to treatment. While that said, I also know that depending on if you can get into treatment and depending on your background, you may have a higher rate of completion if you come from a different culture.
So you bring up a great point. And if we look at the data, Black individuals are 69% less likely to complete their treatment compared to white Americans.
Wow.
You also could look at the percentage of the Latinx individuals. They are 75% less likely to complete their treatment than white Americans. But we also have to think about who these treatment plans are catered to.
Yes. And so what I'm hearing from all of this is, you know, my uncle really fell into that percentage of people that, well, he didn't even touch into the system. But if he did, you know, he may not have been able to complete. And that goes back to your point about we have to develop systems for the community.
Exactly.
And so with the community in mind, representative of the marginalized communities that we talk about all the time, when they go into treatment, it has to look like them. They have to have counselors that understand their backgrounds, and they have to have the ability to be themselves and to be honored so that they can heal. I love that Tarzana Treatment Centers does a really good job of ensuring that people go into those environments. That's one of the things that I think we do best. And now I'm excited that through your work in the community and getting counselors that come from these communities, that now you get to put an entire group of people from marginalized communities into the workforce I mean, it's so wonderful. So when we come back, I want to get a little bit more into what you do and to really talk about some strategies and things that we can do around the world that will really help us to be a part of the solution. We're going to take a quick break and come back, but don't go anywhere because you're not going to want to miss this.
Can you tell which of these children was not born free? Can you tell which of these children was not born equal? Can you tell which of these children does not deserve to be treated with dignity? We can't either. Human right number one. We are all born free and equal.
Welcome back to Finding Hope, the Road to Recovery. Before we left, we were talking about the communities that we serve at Tarzana Treatment Centers, but also the communities that are involved in our school. And I think one of the things that we really want to look at is how this became important to us. We've talked now about these communities, we've talked about intersectionality, but what was the birth child of this? And when we think about our commitment to impacting marginalized communities, when we created TTC College, which is our acronym for Tarzana Treatment Centers College, we wanted to ensure that we weren't just writing things on paper and saying, okay, we're a diverse school, or we're now okay. We wanted to put it into action. And so some of the things that we came into, the first thing was we wanted targeted recruitment of our team. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna let you talk about students in a second, but our team is represented. It's almost like looking at the UN. We have people that come from different races, backgrounds, genders, people with disabilities, people who are older, younger, with a lot of work experience, little work experience, but there is so much, there's a huge breadth of diversity on our team. And I think that's such an incredible thing. We're also in all of the SPAs, the service planning areas in Los Angeles County, which is how the county breaks down how they service people. And our school is located in each of those areas to ensure that everyone has a little bit of access to us. We also have really pushed this idea of peer-based services, not only by pushing it, but then also getting awarded the state's first uniformed grant for schools to provide peer certifications. And we know that peers are simply community members who come from certain communities and go back and they become coaches and counselors and case managers and friends to people who need treatment services. So that's a huge piece for us. I've seen your team do a lot of connection with our community-based organizations, particularly ones that fall into, different categories of marginalized communities. And lastly, what I think is really, really unique and cool about what we do related to marginalized communities is we said, well, that's not enough. We also need the students' experience in class to reflect that we understand marginalized communities must be at the forefront of learning. And so we've created an anti-racist policy.
Yes.
Which goes into our curriculum, our teaching practices, the things we hang up on our walls, the holidays that we take off as a school, and all of those wonderful things. And you've been a huge part of that. So tell me a little bit about your sense of our student body and how it also ties into this whole idea of we need to help to bring up marginalized communities.
So it's so crazy. I went to a Cal State school, and one thing that drew me into that school was the percentage in the diversity that they've had. But once I got there, I was very upset because those numbers were falsified. One thing that we do at our school is really ensure that our numbers are true to the statement of we are very diverse. And you know, your statement that you said, we look like the UN. We really do. We have different immigration statuses. We have different ages, all of that. And so our students come from that as well. We have a 27% of African American counselors wanting to do better for their communities. We also have a 5% of the Asian communities altogether. We also have a 33% of the Latinx community involved within our students. I see schools ask us all the time, how are you doing it? Why are you going out and targeting these communities when they should be coming to us? One thing I always tell them is, we should be going to them.
Yes. They
have been underserved for way too long and haven't had the access to education or healthcare. They don't know where to start. They don't know what resources are available. And so that's where we come in. We go into and make sure that we are exposing ourselves in all of these spas so everyone knows, hey, we're here for you and we want to do better and help heal our community.
Phenomenal. And tell me a little bit more, Haben, about your approach as a leader to ensuring that your team gets out there. What are you guys doing? How are you getting into those communities and not being seen as the big bag healthcare wolf that's coming in to, do damage, but really partner with those communities?
So one thing that we do is we first recognize which communities have been underserved in so long. So we'll make a list of those and then we'll go out and figure out what type of communities and organizations are out there. We want to ensure that we're working with the community, not against the community. So for us, it's being able to work with those that have been recently incarcerated and going back and are now re-entering the society. I did a lot of research in the re-entry population. And
what is re-entry?
Re-entry population is those who have left the criminal justice system and have entered back into society. So they are now considered back to citizens.
So like if somebody left prison or jail and then went back into the community, then they would be considered re-entry.
Correct.
Okay.
So one of the people that we've decided to partner up with is the Department of Rehabilitation. We work with them so closely because we also understand that our students can't afford it once coming out, or those who have a disability, they shouldn't be hindered for their characteristics. Right. They need to be embraced. And so we work with multiple different agencies that have that same mission as us, such as AJCC, which stands for American Job Career Centers. We also work with Continuity Consultant, who works within the Valley State Prison themselves. So we're able to catch those and provide them hope and encouragement to go into the education system and be able to go into the workforce right away. So those are just a few strategies that we've come up with. There's plenty more that we are testing out to see how beneficial or how we could work with the community rather than them seeing us as we're trying to take over. Because that's not our plan at all. We want to ensure that everyone feels welcome and accepted for who they are, but also are being able to be educated. That's one reason why I'm super excited we have the Sheila Keel grant for our GED program called Project Open Doors. that way, those who don't have a high school education are able to receive a GED with us in such a short amount of time.
I mean, it's just, I love the fusion of disciplines, and what you're doing is thinking about the systems and systems that inform those systems and how they're all created and connected. So it's not good enough to now just say, okay, we're an anti-racist school, we're helping the marginalized community, so we're just gonna go work with the organizations. Now we're talking about going into specific places where you can now affect bigger systems around people being able to actually access education at all.
Exactly.
Because you can go sign up people, but you know that you have to have a high school diploma. And if you go into certain marginalized communities where we know because of racism, you're less likely to graduate high school because of the educational system.
Yeah, the school
then
to prison.
That's another form of racism.
Yeah, the school to prison pipeline is a real issue. So we want to ensure that those who have been left behind are not being left behind.
Yeah.
We're providing them another opportunity to be able to receive that education that they would have missed in a racist or discriminatory education system.
Yeah.
What we want to do is be able to provide them that education altogether and remind them that they are loved for who they are and they shouldn't try to change who they are, but also provide them different resources of how do you do time management? What does leadership look like? How do you do email etiquette? Those are some additional services that we provide them. But our main focus to ensure that they know that there's people that are on their side and that are supporting them throughout their whole journey. We don't just leave our students once they graduate. I was just talking to one of my former students yesterday, and she was so excited about telling me about her new job and what she was doing and working with her new patients and what her caseload looks like. And that to me brought me so much joy hearing that, because now I know there's one person in the community that could help heal us, not hinder us.
And how did she find out about TTC College in the first place? What was her story sort of walking in?
Yeah, so her story was she hasn't been in school in a very long time and was very worried about stepping into school. The beauty about it is that she felt comfort with her mom coming into the program at the same time. And so at first I thought that was going to be an issue with mother-daughters, this very intimate, intense content that we have. We want our students to be very vulnerable, but their relationship made it very easy for them to do that together. And again, haven't been in school in so long, and they were worried that they wouldn't be able to complete their courses or fulfill them or understand it or understand the syllabi altogether. It's a brand new system to them.
Yeah.
So what we did is break it down to them very explicitly of, okay, so let's talk about what a syllabi looks like and how to read it, what assignments you have, how to manage your time while doing that and work and you're dealing with a family. So with this student personally, they actually made sure that they reached out. They found us on a Google search, luckily, and loved our core values. And when I went up to meet them, they were very scared and had very high anxiety, which most of our students who haven't been in school in a while will have. But they realized that I wasn't there to have her go through a diploma mill.
Right.
I was there to ensure that she was getting an education for her to better have her better succeed, rather than just having her pay money to this organization. That's not what we're here for.
I really love this idea of being student-centered, because this ties back to what we're talking about, which is we're bringing people in from marginalized communities who have specific needs, who have felt left out, and we are sending them back into those same communities with the hope that they will represent Tarzana Treatment Centers and they will represent this idea of freedom and healing for the community. And what you're doing is you're helping the counselors to become free, and you're healing the counselors just by being their dean of students. And that is, and I can imagine that's a huge honor for you to be able to be in that role where you're not just changing the lives of your students, but thinking about how you're changing the trajectory of their families and the treatment options in the same communities that we've been talking about today.
Yeah, it's completely crazy to think about it that way, because for me, it's more of I'm able to help support this person to achieve their dream that they've had, that they are now dusting off from the cobwebs. But hearing one of my students yesterday tell me, thank you for pushing me to go to school and sitting with them for an hour just to talk to them about our program and provide them information. Now this person is graduating from our program this next week, and I'm so elated for it. This person has been working a full-time job, been able to go through her struggles and tribulations, but at the same time realize what her true mission is and her vision. Oh. And we just had a conversation yesterday about what that looks like for her. And when she told me thank you, I'm like, oh, this was all you. Like, I didn't do anything. And she had to remind me.
You did.
I did. And I had to take a second to say, that is what I'm here for. I want to be here for you to be able to feel like this, so our community is one step closer to being healed.
Yeah, to me, I keep thinking about the richness of our student body. And in particular, I remember one student who came to me, and I got choked up because, I'm also a crybaby, but, with the student said, I knew I was in the right place when I looked on the website.
Yes.
And I saw you and I saw your team because I could see myself. And that statement carries all the way through what we're talking about, which is representation in healthcare, representation in education, seeing marginalized community members running organizations, having anti-racist curriculum, and putting people back into those communities who are safe and who are going to heal the community. So I really appreciate hearing that and just what you're talking about. As we wrap up, one of the things I'm wondering, there's a lot of viewers out there, and they're probably wondering, okay, you guys are talking about marginalized communities and anti-racism and counselors. What can the community do that will help us all to be in a more healed world?
So there's a lot that we could do. So the first thing is opening more clinics in these marginalized communities.
Yes.
Being able to have a place in the communities that they recognize, but also are able to get the treatment that they need, but a successful treatment. Right.
So would that be like having murals on the wall that reflect the community? I think about some of the names of some of the buildings. It's like, we need more names of people of color and people who go under-recognized.
Exactly. One great thing about our school is that one of our locations is at MLK Hospital. So.
And MLK as in?
Martin Luther King.
The Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr.
Yes.
Okay.
So we're able to have our school be represented there. However, not most people are able to have access to that facility or live in that facility. Yeah. So being able to open those clinics in multiple different spas that have these marginalized communities. Another thing is incorporating the community into the treatment centers.
Right.
That is so critical that people don't realize. It's like you said, having those murals, being out in the community, talking to them, seeing what the community needs, and implementing those within the clinic. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of clinics around, like we spoke about, in these marginalized communities. Another thing that we could do is refer counselors' interests altogether. It's having a reference to what counselors is your counselor instead of it being automatically assigned. That way, again, like we spoke about, you have someone that represents your community and you know will understand you to give you the best treatment.
Which that sounds like a viable option, especially this idea, adults like to be able to choose in particular. And for me, when I've gone through my mental health battles, I've wanted to be able to find someone who understands what it means to be a young gay Black kid. And that way, when I get in there, I don't have to explain to them all of these different things. You know, I think that there's so much freedom in that. And it can give our community the ability to make that choice.
That's completely true. I know when I was looking for my therapist, I wanted to have a Black woman that was able to understand my struggles. Sadly, those are not as populated as I wish, but I was able to find someone that understood my immigrant background and is a minority. So with that, I felt more comfortable to still be able to choose them and get the treatment that I need.
Well, there's your intersectionality.
There's my intersectionality, yep.
I really love that piece. And then I think when we think about this concept of peers and how important peers are going to be extremely important in the next 10 plus years in all of healthcare, because we know that the rates that we've talked about of completion and some of the issues that marginalized communities have had in healthcare are because they don't understand what's happening in the past, or it wasn't created for them to understand. And so you then bring in peers who are trained enough to be able to say, okay, Uncle Harry, let me help you get into treatment. Let me help you to understand what these long applications are. Let me, get on the phone with you, or help you get onto the online system. And so that is what we need to start to do more of, is to really take care of this community. When we first started this, we were talking about this idea of marginalized communities, and we're trying to demarginalize it.
Yes, I like that terminology.
We want people to have equity.
Yes, diversity, inclusion.
We want to honor intersectionality and to let people know that where you come from is not a curse. It's a blessing. And it's something that somebody needs you. Somebody needs the Black trans woman counselor today, desperately. And so if we can continue to be a part of that movement, and we can continue to assure that people can become free and that communities do not have to be on the margins anymore, then I think that that's been a life well lived. And you have done an incredible job living your life.
Oh, thank you.
And providing for this community. So I'm very honored to sit next to you every day and to watch you fight for this community. We need more people like you.
Stop. You're making me blush.
It's okay. Thank you so much for joining us. And this has been Finding Hope, the Road to Recovery. Take care.
Finding Hope, the Road to Recovery. Brought to you by Tarzana Treatment Centers. You can visit our website at www.tarzanatc.org or call 1-800-996-1051.